Hello, and welcome to today's live chapter reading of Musical Murder Mystery, Box Set 1 by K.L. Montgomery, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. I sat across the table from Margaret Crow, our executive director, Buzz, our artistic director, and Victor Hastings, our musical director. They had the cast list for our upcoming production of The Sound of Music spread out in front of them. Nervously twiddling my thumbs, I tried to gauge the part I got by the expressions on their faces, but it was impossible to tell. Ruby, we know your first production with us got off to a rough start, Margaret began. That was the understatement of the century. I'd witnessed a castmate's murder, been framed for it, and then helped the police catch the true murderers. And somehow, as the murdered castmate's understudy, I managed to take over for her in the role of Glinda in our traveling theater company's production of The Wizard of Oz. So, yeah, rough start seemed to be a euphemism for total bleeping disaster. We don't want to put undue pressure on you for this show, not while you're still recovering, Margaret continued, and Buzz and Victor solemnly nodded in agreement. So please don't think our casting decision is a reflection of how you performed in our last production. It's more that we want you to have a stress-free tour and get some time to rest and heal from your ordeal. I suppose that meant I was back in the ensemble again. Feeling a bit numb, I lowered my chin in acknowledgement. I wasn't sure I had any other words right now. I'd belted my heart out at my audition, but maybe it just wasn't good enough. I wasn't exactly a spring chicken at 34. There were a few younger actresses in our company, so I probably wasn't the best suited for the lead role of Maria, but I was hoping for something that would challenge me. It didn't matter. Whatever they decided, I would adapt. I'd be flexible. I always adapted. They always found a way to keep on going, no matter what anyone threw at me. Maybe you'd like to take some time off before our tour starts, Buzz suggested. You could go stay with family or friends, whatever you'd like. I know you won't have any trouble picking up the choreography or music. I let out a soft laugh. Don't really have much of either, to be honest. You guys are my family. My grandparents just moved into a new condo in Florida, so I'll probably go see them when our tour heads down that way. But until then, well, I'm just fine with working. It takes my mind off things. Okay, Ruby, if that's what you want to do. But don't forget we're here for you, Margaret assured me. Just let us know what you need. The hills are alive with the sound of my own heavy breathing. My lungs burned as I pumped my arms and pounded my feet into the pavement. The sun was just beginning to rise over the purple misted mountains in the distance, winking at me over wispy peach and amber clouds. Running at a high altitude after so many months near sea level was about 4 million times more difficult than I wanted it to be. I needed to fill my mind with something positive, something to distract me from the pain. My favorite things from our new show came to me. I hummed the melody as I continued to push forward. These are a few of my favorite things: acting and singing, running, talking to myself, making up my own lyrics to songs. Let me back up a moment. Listing my running as a favorite wasn't exactly truthful. It was kind of a blatant lie, in fact. Endorphins. Endorphins are a few of my favorite things. So I sing, burning of muscles and lungs that are heaving, feeling limbs stretch, and oh, it's so relieving. Endorphins that make all my cells want to sing. These are a few of my favorite things. On stage was the only other place I could ever achieve that endorphin rush. I'd been performing in one way or another since I was 3 years old. My grandmother, who raised me, somehow got the notion I would be on television. So she got me an agent, and I actually did a few commercials when I was growing up. You know those cute little kids on TV hawking all sorts of products, from toys to foods to clothes, and looking positively adorable while doing it? Yeah, that was me. I was and still am more of a character actor. In an ad for some sort of miracle cleaner, I was the devilish kid who drew all over the walls with a marker, or in one for stain stick, I was the sporty kid covered in grass and mud from a soccer game. Or in an ad for bandages, I was the clumsy kid who tripped over her own 2 feet, got an ouchie, and my pretend mommy had to doctor me up. When my kid voice matured, it turned out I could sing. That still didn't make me right for the coveted roles, the princess, the inguine, the femme fatale. I was still just a plain looking chubby redhead with a big, powerful voice. Still am, in fact. Hey, Ruby, how was your run? Buzz asked as he stepped out of the elevator and into the hotel lobby. He dipped his chin and lifted his cup of coffee towards me in solidarity. We were the only members of the troupe regularly up at this hour. Exhilarating, I grinned, even though I was still breathing hard and I had to walk the last half mile. Why did I think running in the mountains was a good idea? A little voice in my head sang out, I am crazy, going on crazier, to the tune of 16 going on 17. Our artistic director ran his hand through his spiky hair that was somewhere between platinum blonde and snow white, then looked down at the clipboard he was holding. He scanned the sheet, pursing his lips as if he needed to check off my readiness before he could get started on the rest of his to-do list. Glad to hear it. All ready for rehearsal today? I shrugged. It's not like I have a part. It was true. We were staging The Sound of Music, and though I was of coming off a supporting role as Glinda in The Wizard of Oz, I wasn't even considered for Maria, Baroness Schrader, or even the housekeeper. Nope, I was playing the tiny roles of a nun at the convent, a party goer at Captain Von Trapp's home, and a random citizen of Salzburg at the music festival. I wasn't even an understudy this time. At least I get to wear some cute costumes. Buzz frowned as his gaze ran down my figure from my hot red face to my coming untied running shoes. He always looked fresh in his expertly tailored pants and jackets in vibrant hues. Neon shades were his favorite. I, on the other hand, didn't exactly look top notch in my sweaty running clothes, and my hair was a mess, wayward curls slipping out of the high ponytail I'd attempted before my run. My hair was freshly dyed from my trademark red to a golden blonde. Our hair and makeup guy said it might help make me look a little less Irish. Little did he know that the Echoes had their roots in Germany. Buzz let out one of his trademark sighs, the one that meant, I don't like this, but there's nothing I can do about it. He reached out to gently lay his hand on my shoulder. Are you really doing okay, Ruby? I know we asked you before we left Indiana, but I don't want you to think we've forgotten what you went through a few months ago. I nodded, remembering when I faced him, our executive director, and our musical director as they assigned me my parts for the show. They expressed their casting choices were because they wanted me to take it easy during this production. Be honest with him, Ruby, I told myself. Quit acting like everything's hunky dory. I mean, I'm still a little traumatized, and I wake up every now and again in a cold sweat, but he shook his head, his eyes full of pity. The company will pay for you to see someone, he said. Like a counselor, if you want. Margaret and I already discussed it. I already knew their concerns, for my mental health affected their casting decisions. They wanted to make sure I didn't take on more than I could handle. They didn't want me to be under any pressure to perform. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Actually, it made things worse. It meant I had a lot of time backstage, a lot of time with my thoughts and memories of what happened on our first stop of our previous tour when we were performing The Wizard of Oz. My friend and mentor, Celeste Downing, was murdered. But the specifics were a long story I'd rather not rehash. I was ready to move on. And The Sound of Music was our new list of tour dates in the South, or how I planned to do it. Sweet tea, biscuits, and slow southern drawls. Anyone? Talk about a few of my favorite things. Last night we arrived at our first stop, Asheville, North Carolina. And other than my first jogging experience in the mountains being less than ideal, I was pretty sure I was going to love it here. Mother Abbess, you come forward on the second line. Let's change that in the blocking, shall we? Buzz weaved his way between a bevy of nuns, including myself. Diane Beaufort nodded, her hazel eyes glittering under the stage lights. She was getting into character by wrapping her long graying hair around her head in an austere bun. Sure. So you want me to move on the word problem? Yep. That's no problem, right? Buzz winked at her. He could be a little punny at times. We all loved him anyway. My eyes landed on our executive director, locked and loaded in one of her infamous button down pantsuits, with her carefully coiffed hair and ubiquitous leather bound planner. She stood at the back of the theater talking to the house manager. Unlike the slightly awkward but very sweet house manager in Bryce Beach, the first stop of our last tour, this woman was a piece of work. Hattie Queen was always late, always losing things, important things like the keys to the dressing rooms or prop cabinets, and she was always complaining. I felt sorry for Miss Crow for having to deal with her, to be honest. Ruby? Buzz's voice snapped me from my thoughts. Yes, I stepped forward. When you were part of the chorus, you didn't want to draw attention to yourself during rehearsal. It was a surefire way to tick off the director. The only thing worse would be drawing attention to yourself during an actual performance. Our artistic director's lips curled into a frown. Are you paying attention, Ruby? I think I said your name like 4 times before you answered me. Oops. Sorry, Buzz. My lips also twisted downward as I stared down at my feet. It was hard to get back on my A game after the last show. Despite what happened and being dragged into the drama myself, I'd pulled off the part of Glinda pretty handedly, if I do say so myself. I was capable of so much more than what Buzz and Miss Curl were willing to entrust me. I wish there was a way to show them, to prove what I could do. Buzz's lips pursed as he tapped his clipboard before looking at me. I need you to turn at the end of Diane's line and mirror what Ellen is doing. Got it? I made a note in my script. Even though we were off book, I was still carrying mine around like a security blanket. I didn't know why. It wasn't like I had any lines, not even a tiny one. There are no small parts, only small actors, or so the saying went. But I wasn't small. And that had always been my leading theory on why I never got the big parts. It explained why I never had and probably never would. I could probably never set my sights on anything loftier than Glinda the Good Witch because of my size. I was a curvy, voluptuous girl, and I was just too much for most leading lady roles. We finished up the scene, and Buzz was through with me. So I wandered backstage to see what everyone else was doing. The Von Trapp youngsters were all homeschooled kiddos who had a parent, grandparent, or some other type of guardian traveling with them. When they weren't needed on stage, most of them were hard at work completing math worksheets, or they had their noses buried in their literature books. The young man playing Frederick looked up at me, tilting his head curiously. Your scene is done already? Yep, they're doing some blocking work with Maria for the next scene, I shrugged. Awesome. Thanks, Ruby, he grinned and ran off to find the boy playing Kurt. They had no doubt become the best of friends. I was impressed. Frederick, whose real name was Bentley, if I remembered correctly, knew my real name. I was always impressed when anyone knew my real name. This was my second show with the Melody Street Players, but I still felt like a newbie. Maybe it was because there was a gray cloud hanging over me, keeping me in shadow, left over from Celeste's death. Maybe Buzz is right. Maybe I do need to talk to someone. Usually, when the blues crept in, running kept them from taking over. But after today's run in the mountains, I wasn't sure if endorphins were powerful enough to overcome my current funk. Just as I was getting ready to head out into the house to watch the rest of rehearsal, Diane made her way toward me. She was one of those mature women who was beautiful now but must have been breathtaking in her youth. She had a sophistication about her and carried herself with grace. Despite an almost regal demeanor, she was perfectly suited to the role of Mother Abbess. Beyond her warm, nurturing side, she also held high expectations for her colleagues to work as hard as she did. Ruby, my sweet Ruby. She took one of my hands into hers and squeezed it with great affection. How are you, my dear? A little distracted today? I laughed. Nothing escaped her notice either. She was kind and loving, and she actually reminded me quite a bit of my mentor, Celeste, whom I'd lost a few months ago in the tragedy in Bryce Beach. Sorry, I think I'm just excited to see the city. Glad we're finally here. You should definitely make plans to see the Biltmore while we're in town, she suggested. The house is magnificent, of course, but the gardens will heal your soul. Trust me on this. I spent many hours wandering those gardens and others like them. Flowers are a balm for a wounded spirit, my sweet girl. Her words were somewhat cryptic, but I soaked them in nonetheless. Whenever it was part of her character or not, she had the old wise woman archetype down pat. Of course, she wasn't really old, probably only in her mid 50s. I was sure she only seemed older because she was playing Mother Abbess. She had stopped dyeing her hair and wearing makeup. She liked to fully immerse herself in her roles, a true devotee of method acting. I flashed her a soft, warm smile. I'm going to try to get out there soon, definitely after opening weekend. She squeezed my hand again. Good, good, my dear. Don't wait too long. Your soul needs all the healing it can get. She wasn't around for what happened in Bryce Beach, but it seemed like she knew. I wondered if Margaret or Buzz had told her, or if she just sensed I was hurting. My brown eyes met her glimmering hazel, and a vow was made. I promise I'll go as soon as I can. She grasped my face between her hands and kissed my cheek. Sometimes it was hard to tell if she was always this sweet and motherly, or if it was all part of her acting method. Either way, I understood and sympathized. I could be a bit of a chameleon at times too. It sure was easier to play a role than to make up a script as you went along.